Good morning, all of you. Today we are going to discuss Indian thought in Emerson. Emerson was a famous philosopher, essayist, poet, and renowned preacher of America. He represented America in a different mode in mid of 18th century. He tried to know the value of internal power and materialistic world. Therefore, he read Hindu texts like the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, various religious and German idealism. Emerson believed in progress. He had deep faith in improvement by gradual means. Then, even Saturn, the rebel, becomes an agent of potential progress. Emerson's works reveal his basic philosophical and mystic ideas. He held that God is moral law, that the world is an emanation from God, that man has divinity within him, that self reliance is a supreme value, that the religion of the spirit alone is true. This is an ethical idealism. Indian transcendentalism find a clear expression in Emerson's writing. Rolf Waldo Emerson, he was born at May 24, 1803, and he left the world at April 27, 1882. Who, west by his middle name Waldo, was an American essayist, lecturer, philosopher, abolitionist, and a poet who led the transcendentalist movement of the mid of 19th century. He was seen as a champion of individualism and a precise critic of the countervailing pressures of society, and his ideology was disseminated through dozens of published essays and more than 1,500 public lectures across the United States. The presence of Indian elements in American consciousness was not accident, but it is the outcome of a deeply estranged tradition that formed the American mind, of which one of the best representatives was Emerson. Transcendentalism was the first American intellectual movement that showed true interest in Eastern philosophy. Emerson started to read about Indian philosophy and mythology in the Edinburgh Review between 1820 to 1825. His interest in Indian thought grew when he was a young Harvard graduate and continued until the end of his writing career. For example, the concept of Brahma plays a central role in his works and ideas. He is also very much interested in Bhagavad Gita. Some of his essays, such as Self Reliance, deals with a theme that is very much similar to the concept of karma. Emerson's acquaintance in depth with Indian thought began around 1830 when he read some outstanding expositions of Indian philosophy by Joseph Mary Dignardo, Victor Cousin, and perhaps by Aquintil Duperron. The influence of Indian religion and philosophy was pervasive. The religious element that Emerson's mind absorbed from Indian sources became the basis of his religious and philosophical concepts, especially the oversoul, self, nature, illusion, and moral principles. In the words of Anupam Ratan S. Nagar, I quote, in Indian thought, Vedanta is referred to as the science of emancipation, mukti. This was one of the several foreign philosophies that reached America in the early decades of the 19th century and greatly influenced the American scholar, spiritual laws, and the oversoul. He illustrates the interconnectedness of all lives in an almost pantheistic view of God in matter. Unquote. Insofar as Emerson's concept of oversoul is concerned, it is wholly Indian. Emerson's poem Brahma is called the poem Song of Soul, which later on he changed to Brahma. Emerson regarded this poem as a center to his thought. The first stanza of hymn describes the sublime attributes of the Supreme Being and the three forms in which the being appears as a power, wisdom, and goodness. I quote, Spirit of his spirits, who though every part of his space expanded and of endless time, beyond the stretch of lap ring thought sublime, baddest uproar into beauteous order start, what line first impelled three to exert they might, goodness unlimited. Unquote. Emerson's conception of union is similar to that of Upanishads. When the mind turns within, it attains unity. Likewise, Emerson writes, I quote, uh, infallible is the union of man and God in every act of the soul. The simplest person who is in his integrity worships God becomes God yet for ever and ever the influx of this better and the universal self is new and unreachable. Unquote. The person who is united with God realizes the friendliness and scaredness of all things. For him, everything, whether an object or a man, becomes divine. Emerson gives this in his essays History in the following verse, I quote, to the poet, the philosophers, to the saint, all things are friendly and scared, all event profitable, all toils holy, all man divine, every chemical substance, every plant, every animal in its growth teaches the unity of cause, the variety of experience. Unquote. Emerson's portrait of the soul echoes the description of the soul in the Kathopanishad as cited by Swami Paramanand, in which the soul has been defined as essence of the facilities and the power that moves all the senses. It is, I quote, the ear of ear, the mind of mind, the speech of speech, the life of the life, the eye of the eye, and that which cannot be thought by the mind, by which mind is able to think, that which is not seen by the eye, but by which the eye is able to see, that which cannot be heard by the ear, but by which the ear is able to hear. Unquote. Emerson's idea of mind or soul, the buddhi of Indian philosophy, is also derived from Hindu scriptures. Emerson recognizes two parts of mind, intellect and intuition. Intellect gives knowledge of variety or the knowledge of surface or the power of differences, and intuition gives us the knowledge of unity, harmony, or super rational knowledge. Emerson developed this idea of intuition in his essay Self Reliance while inquiring into the reason of self trust. I quote, we denote this primary wisdom as intuition, whilst all later teachings are tuitions. In that deep force, the last fact behind which analysis cannot go, all things find their common origin. For the sense of being which is calm ours arises, we know not how the soul is not derived from things, from space, from light, from time, from man, but one with them and proceeds obviously from the same source where their life and being also proceed. Unquote. Emerson thought of the soul as within self and nature in a transcendental sense. Man's creation, nature for Emerson represents a ceaseless flow of life. On the whole, Emerson's nature is similar to Indian Maya, which is a double instrument of concealment and creation. As an instrument of concealment, it creates illusion. Emerson accepts doctrine of illusion as the theory of life, which educates man that illusion is God's instrument. Emerson notes that Yogendra, being the illusionary power of Vishnu, deceives the whole world. He writes, I quote, in fact, we may come to accept it as a fixed rule and theory of our state of education that God is substance and his method is illusion. The Eastern shakes on the goodness Yogendra, the great illusionary energy of Vishnu, by whom has utter ignorance and the whole world is be guided. Unquote. In conclusion, thus the Indian philosophical and religious concepts and teachings had a great influence on Emerson's intellectual works by exploring and utilizing Indian spiritual beliefs and philosophical traditions. Emerson paved the way for his successors who continued to dig into the richness of ancient texts such as the Upanishads and the Gita. Therefore, with regard to Emerson's contribution to American scholars' growing interest in Indian thought, Dal Rapi in convincingly right when he says that I quote, there has been a continuous concern for Indian thought in United States since Emerson's early years. Unquote. Works consulted. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.